Okay, so what we're going to look at, we will be looking at what we call a straight line, and linear is the math word for straight, okay? So when we see a linear graph, or a linear equation, it means when you draw it on a set of axes, it'll be a straight line. So say, for example, this is a linear equation, okay? So when you graph it on the graph, it'll produce a straight line. So say what we could do is, so we know along here is the x-axis, along the horizontal, this is the x-axis. So what you can do, if you were here at this point here, say for example, that's when x is 1. Okay, if I put x is 1 into this formula, so I've got the formula here. If I put x is 1, so every time I see x, I'll put the number 1. So you'd say y equals, and 2 times 1 is 2, so it'd be 4 minus 2. So y equals 2. So when x equals 1, y equals 2. So there you found a point. So you said when x, remember we have an x and y point. So we said when x is 1, y is 2. So we've got a point there, 1, 2. So if I'm going to sub in another point. So I'm going to try when x is equal 1. I'm going to try when x equals 5. Okay, so I'm going to sub that in to the formula. So it'll be y equals 4 minus 2 times 5. So y would equal 4 minus 10. Yeah? So y will equal negative 6. So another point I could have is 5, negative 6. So when x is 5, sorry, I'm a little bit off. I'm going to say down here, we've got negative 6. Okay, so we've got 5, negative 6. So when you're drawing these straight lines, you only need 2 points. Okay, so you could always just plug in 2x values like what I just did, and then we can draw it. So I've got the 2 dots. Once you've got 2 points, you get your ruler out, and we'll just turn around and we'll line up those. Can you see that ruler? No. Well, I'm going to line up the 2 dots. You'll see me draw the line in a minute. So, and then I can draw that line through, and there I've drawn that graph. All right, so we're going to look at that. There are a couple other things we can remember. Remember that when you have a formula like this, the number by itself is, that one is the y-intercept. And you can see here, it did cross there, so I could have put that as a point. But the main thing is, you only ever need 2 points. Just sub 2 points in and we could draw it like that. Okay, this shows you how to do it on the calculator. We're not going to come across this very often. You're not going to need it, but it's there in case. You probably don't need to. What I just did before is probably what you're going to do the most. So there's the instructions. You've got it handy if you need to. But let's move on. So what we're going to talk about now is we often talk about the slope of that straight line. So the slope is the gradient. So you might write that in there. So the slope, might write the word gradient. Okay, so the slope's a gradient, and it tells us how the steepness. Now, we can use a formula to find the gradient or the slope. So what we've normally, in our straight lines, we used to call them, remember we had mx plus c, yeah? And the gradient was this letter here, m. We're going to change now in our maths. Our straight line is going to be written like this. It'll be a plus the bx, where it's still the same thing, but b is the gradient. So maybe over here on the formula for the slope, let's put that's the b value. So from now on, we'll call it the b value. Okay, so we can always use, and this is using 2 points to find the gradient. So you can use 2 points where you put the y, one y value and the other y value from the points and things like that. So we're going to practice that. Here's what a few gradients look like. So if your line's going up, you would have a positive b value. Yeah? If your line is going down, it'll be a negative b value in your formula. It's the next one. If you have it as 0, your formula, there'll be no b value. And so you might just want to put an example of that. This would be, just say, example y would equal 2. That would be an example of a question. And up here, we'd have an example could be y equals negative 2x plus 4. So see that b value is negative. And an example of this one could be, we could have an example, it could be y equals, 3x plus 2, whatever. And that is the b value there. Okay? So, and then if you have 0 gradient, it's horizontal, it's like that's walking across flat. The equation would look like this. And then the other one where it's like this, it's undefined. So an example of an equation would be, you'll actually see it would be x equals 3 or something. It's just one of those x equals. You don't need to worry too much about that. These are the ones you will get, those 3 scenarios. So here, they want us to find the slope. So if I write the formula for slope, remember we're saying it is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. What that just means is label your point. So if I call this x1, I'll call that y1. If I call that x2, I call that y2. So it doesn't matter which point you call point 1, as long as if you're going to call it x1, it has to be y1 next to it. Okay? So if I pop that formula in, so my y2 is number 3 and my y1 is number 9. So there we go. Got 3 minus 9. Now my x2 is 2 and my x1 is 5. So when you look at it, I get negative 6 over negative 3. What's a negative divided by a negative? So we end up with 2. So this means this would be my b value here. This is my b value is 2. Now it's positive and it's going uphill. It should be going up, shouldn't it? Because it's a positive number. So when I go to find this slope, what should the final number be? Positive or negative on this second one? It's going to be negative, isn't it? Because it's going downhill. Let's hope we get that. So we're going to write the formula out. So we're just going to label it. I'm going to call this one x1, y1, and I'll call this one x2, y2. If you decide to label your points the other way around, you call the top one 0.2 and the bottom one 0.1, you'll still get the same answer. Okay? It ends up being the same. So I've got y2 is 4 for me, minus 7 over 5 minus 2. So I end up with negative 3 over positive 3. So that equals negative 1. So the b value is negative, which is good because it was going down. Okay, so if you ever have to find the slope, there you go. Okay, so we're going to have we'll be given equations, and what we call this is the intercept slope form. So it's when it looks like this y equals is the intercept slope form. And what you're going to do is you're just going to read off. So the number by itself, that A equals the y-intercept. Okay, so whatever that number is, that's where it crosses on the y-axis. And we've already had a look at it, and we know the B, and we're going to call the B is the slope value. So what we just want you to be able to look at an equation and be able to tell me. So if you look at this first one, you have to just say what the y-intercept is. So the number by itself is -6. So I'm going to say the y-intercept is 6. And then it asks me to say what the slope, oops, sorry, can't spell. The slope is. And the slope for that one, oh my God, I still can't spell, is 9. Yeah, sorry. Slope is 9. Okay, with the next one, what's the y-intercept? Number 10. And what's the slope? -5. Make sure you put the sign that's in front of it. Okay, with this next one, the y-intercept, it's not there, so it's actually 0. There's no number by itself, and then the slope is -2. So the number that's next to the x is always the slope. So in this last one, we have to be careful because it's not written in y equals form. So I'd actually move this over. So it should really be written like this, y equals 4x plus 5. So if I do that, what's the y-intercept? What's the y-intercept? No. What's the number by itself? And what's the slope? Nah, because I didn't move that. Okay. So with this next question, they want you to write the equation where they told you the intercept was 9, so that would be by itself, and the slope was 6, so I'd have to put an x with the 6. In the next one, the intercept's 2, but the slope is -5, so I'd have to have the x with that. And then the last one, the intercept's -3, and the slope is 2. Okay? Okay, when you're asked to sketch the graph, you're not going to ask to be actually sketch it. What they'll say in your future is you're going to be given this equation and you're asked to draw this line on the graph, okay? Which is the same thing, but you're going to get asked to draw it on. So what you're going to do is they'll already have given you a set of axes. So say I'm going to just draw it like this. I'll draw up my set of axes. So in your year 12 and all that, you're going to be already given a graph, okay? So we'd call this y and this is x, okay? And they want you to draw this line on that axis. So what you're going to do, so to draw, you only need 2 points to draw, yeah? Remember at the start we only needed 2 points to draw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pretend this was your axes along here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sub x equals 1 into it and x equals 6, and they're going to get my 2 points. So my 2 points, when x, let's draw it in the green. So when x equals 1 into that equation, so into y equals 8 plus 2x, you'd have y equals 8 plus 2 times 1. So what would that equal? Y equals 10. So there's 1 point. I've got when x is 1, y is 10. So I'm just going to make up my little bit of an axis here. I'm just going to say there's 10, okay? Doesn't matter. We'll do it like that. So here is when x is 1, y is 10. So I've drawn that. And then I'm going to do 2 points. It doesn't matter which x we use, but I always like to just go to the end one, so my line will draw through the whole graph that they want me to. So I'm now going to do x equals 6 into this equation, so y equals 8 plus 2x. So y would equal 8 plus 2 times 6. So what would that be? Y equals 20, yeah? So the other point is when x equals 6, y equals 20. So I'm just going to go up here would be 20. So here's my other point. When x is 6, y is 20, then you're going to get your ruler and you join up those 2 points. Okay? And you just draw your line through them like that. Okay?
Yeah.